What are some things that we can immediately expect to happen when we kick the bucket? That is one of the burning questions that I like to talk about on this channel and as well as my books. Now, a lot of attention is placed on kind of the conditions of these other universes, other dimensions that so many of us have been to or have reported. But I think a really important topic is what things we can expect in those moments as we cross over. The first thing I should point out is that, based upon my research, it can really vary between people. So, one concept that I have tried to really push back against, and I certainly have, like in the last video with Peter Fenwick out of London, which did receive some criticism because of his respectability in the field. But I think that in this field of research, we need to be very careful about creating broad general assumptions, and especially if that involves things like merging into source consciousness and disappearing. Because, as I've been pointing out lately, there's all these kind of metaphysical urban legends that are being born, that get propagated, and oftentimes it is ideas that can cause a lot of stress for people, as well as the fact that they're not so accurate. And I'll hear these ideas presented in kind of like the upper tier of near-death studies and things like that. And so that's kind of what I want to push back against. And one way to do that is to learn from people who have had experiences and listen to them, hear what they have to say, hear what those experiences were, and maybe try to help them understand it better and have them help us understand better what exactly they experienced. Because, as I mentioned in the last video, I trust people's experiences more even than people who have PhDs. As well, you should trust people's experiences more than you trust what I have to say. Now, I'm not saying that people are infallible. I mean, people all the time get things wrong. Ask any lawyer, attorneys, ask anybody who deals with the court system, and you'll see how people can almost imagine entire events. But that doesn't mean that people are completely fallible. It just means that we have to approach things critically, and we have to pick apart information, understand the limits sometimes of human psychology. So that's kind of how I feel about that. So anyway, you are watching Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is your host, Cyrus. We talk about complex supernatural metaphysical issues. Let me think of any news or updates lately. I'm still here in Hanoi, Vietnam, still in this nice apartment. I'm going in just a few days to, well, hopefully, if my visa finally clears, to India. And I will miss this place. And that's about it, really. It's a bit late. It's like 3:30 in the morning. I really should be asleep right now. But here I am, up doing a video, getting some more information out there for you guys. So I hope you like it. So let's continue. If you're new around here, please hit that subscribe button and the blue notification bell. If you like these topics, then that's the best way to show it. And I have to remind you guys, I do have a Patreon up now, so if you want to support this research, this kind of work, it's as little as $3 a month. There's no pressure. You don't have to do it. But people who sign up, they get access to some special things. Higher tiers involve the bi-weekly classes, really in-depth discussions, big archives of other discussions, really cool stuff, and helps support this work, helps get Afterlife information out there. So you can join at the Patreon link in the description. Okay, with that out of the way, so let's talk about this subject. So we have a contributor at Afterlife Topics Forum who I'll leave anonymous. I don't like to speak people's names for privacy reasons on this channel, but I just want to talk a little bit about what her experiences were during a near-death experience. Now, I've read at this point hundreds of near-death experiences, and they always amaze me. There's always these really interesting, varied things that can happen to a person, in the moments after death. excuse me, but many times they're very different, but they have similar themes, commonalities. And so one theme that comes up is the idea that maybe if you keep going, you're going to be wiped of all your memory, your personal identity is going to merge with some higher consciousness. And so that's kind of like what Fennec was talking about in the prior video. But I'm trying to figure out if that is an accurate assessment, because as I've postulated, I don't think it is. If that were the case, then we wouldn't be in contact with people on the other side who are still themselves and can still communicate and still have all of their memories and have their same personalities and everything. And so there's this debate, because then, the people in these kind of scientific research groups and think tanks, they have been postulating anyway that, well, maybe our deceased loved ones are big illusions, right? And I don't like those. I don't like going down that path, because it causes so much pain, so much damage to people who, they've had experiences with their deceased loved ones. They don't want to be told that they're just a bunch of illusions, right? So something about this is inconsistent. Something doesn't add up. So there's a discussion going on the group. So first, let me just kind of summarize her near-death experience. I found myself in a white tunnel. I was not being swept along, but was moving along at my own pace. Once I became aware and focused on what was happening, I became very curious about the tunnel itself. As I moved along, I looked very closely at the floor, the walls, etc. of the tunnel, and discovered that it was made of tiny sparks or points of light, which were each encased in what looked exactly like test tubes. And these test tubes were densely packed and emitting light, which made the whole tunnel white. So we talk about tunnels and the tunnel and light. Like, this is not just like a metaphorical tunnel and light. This is a literal tunnel and light. That is, in a sense, as it's an actual tunnel that's made of like glass and different elements, and there's like these devices that are containing pinpoints of light. Upon even closer inspection, I became aware that each point of light was me. What does that mean? Some kind of a construction by her higher self, and that was monitoring or deconstructing elements of who she was during what I would assume are incarnation processes. God, I have no idea. Then I decided to continue my journey for a while understanding I left my body. After a while, I began to forget who I was and felt that I was not disintegrating, but becoming a part of all that is. This did not frighten me, but is not what I wanted either. I made the decision to return to my body, and so I did. So keep in mind, this woman's experience originally came out of the near-death forum, and she's repeating it for us on the group. I was asking specifically about experiences like this in relation to my critique of Peter Fennec, and to try to flesh out, is this really an experience where someone's going to be deleted and merged with higher consciousness, or maybe that's not it. In the topic, or in the conversation that follows, I attempt to flesh out a little bit what's going on here. The near-death experiencer says that, despite this experience, she has no problem with, communication with deceased people, that her best friend is a medium who sees and hears spirits, and she's, she knows all about that subject. So, so she doesn't think that everybody who crosses over is going to be deleted, or they're going to just merge with something, and then their prior identity is going to disappear, even though it's like she felt this way when she was in that tunnel, that something was beginning to overwhelm her. And she says that there's enough variance of reports to allow all sorts of different experiences to happen, which I agree with. So here's what happens next. So I decided to tag Michelle Page, the practical medium, who basically, like myself, when I've had astral experiences, Michelle Page tries to get practical, kind of no-nonsense advice about the other side and straightforward answers, which is what we're all about at Afterlife Topics, which is great. I'm trying to figure this out. So are people really on the verge of merging with higher consciousness and then disappearing, as Fennec says? Are people, are we after after death? Do we temporarily we see our loved ones and then it's just plump? We get absorbed back into the cosmic galactic soup, whatever you want to call it. Or is this a misunderstanding, right? So with her talking on this thread, I tag the practical medium to hopefully get some straight answers about this topic. And this is what she says. What you experienced was being in a place you weren't supposed to be in. And keep in mind, this is, she's kind of like transmuting information from that side. And her, she's very evidential. Definitely trust her that there is a communication channel happening between her and some of her close deceased acquaintances that she works with. So she goes on. What you experienced was being in a place you were not supposed to be in the sense it wasn't your time. Did you have the option of crossing over? Absolutely, because free will is a thing. Was it an optimal time for you to go? Not particularly. That's why you were moving from this plane to the other in slow motion. Let me back up. So she experienced like she was in this tunnel, but it was kind of going very slowly, like time slowed down, I guess. So to give you the opportunity to turn back and live your physical life for so long as possible. The feeling, now this is key, the feeling of forgetting who you are and fragmentation was you feeling the loss of your prior body, not your psyche or your soul. Had you kept moving forward, that moment would have passed and you would have regained your sense of self. A majority of people who cross over experience that sensation in the span of only a heartbeat. It's slow enough for you to know it happened, fast enough that you don't know what you moved through. The powers that be on the other side felt that you still had more to do here and took action so you could see what was going on and know you still had a viable body waiting for you if you turned back. I keep hearing watchers as I write this, which tells me you were being closely observed as to which decision you would make so that they could react accordingly. Mind blown. It's a very interesting interpretation of what was going on behind the scenes during her experience. So how does the near-death experiencer feel about this? She says, you put that so beautifully and you really moved me. I know my guides watch over me. And then she continues, tagging Michelle Page. I've been thinking about your response. To give my slow-mo experience a little bit of context, I sometimes remember attending classes in the spiritual realm. One such memory I recall had me asking the teacher in a normal classroom how all the students got there. The teacher pointed to a large framed picture that was above the chalkboard on one side of the room. In the picture were images of all the students in attendance, and each student's head and shoulders profile was surrounded by like this grayish wormhole. And the teacher said that each of us can travel via a wormhole specifically tuned to us. It's kind of interesting because usually we just teleport around, but as I always mention, we don't have full access to all those abilities sometimes. So the idea of using like a wormhole or other locomotion techniques makes sense to me. In my own astral experiences, I'd say the majority of people I've met during those experiences do not have abilities to transport instantaneously. It's like this. It really is a skill. It's difficult. This is context for why each point of light that made the tunnel in my NDE experience was me, because it was all like different elements of wormholes from different points in time or on a timeline, something like that. The second point I wanted to make is that my guides truly do understand my personality. By giving me the opportunity to closely examine the workings of the wormhole tunnel, they satisfied my curiosity about it, and in addition allowed me to have a solitary rather than a hands-on guided experience. I now wish I had decided to stay a little bit longer. It would have been so interesting to have the full experience. I was frightened by the feeling of fragmentation. I'm so glad you have explained that, and your explanation Makes perfect sense, so thank you again. What does this mean? It means that with the help of a medium and kind of digging deeper into the experience, this experiencer came to find that, there was this almost this almost jarring experience of feeling like she was kind of losing herself or merging into something. But now it's been explained that this really is a temporary experience that involves kind of like slugging off the body, and kind of like your mind is reopening itself back up to its condition when it's not being tampered with by the third three-dimensional brain we have right now. And so it has like this cognitive effect. So is that what's happening when we hear about people merging with group consciousness? Because I do believe you can merge with group consciousness in the sense of like heavy meditation and samadhi and these types of experiences. But now I'm going to say I think that this is different than what's happening in these near-death experiences. See, in these near-death experiences, what seems to be happening is they're going through this transition out of the physical body, or I should say the 3D body. And it's creating this cognitive effect. And I've heard this many NDEs where people actually feel like it's this jarring sensation, and they're actually afraid they're going to, quote, lose themselves if they go any further. And sometimes that fear is what prompts them to turn back. But is that a permanent condition? And what we're learning is that it's not a permanent condition. And I perfectly understand why near-death experience researchers are misinterpreting this, because they're not asking mediums for clarification. They're not going through other channels of information. This is, they're just trying to make sense of things based on people's own experiences, but they forget that people don't always understand what their own experiences are. And to understand the subject of an afterlife, we have to look at the bigger picture. So there you go. That's something that might happen to you when you die. You might find yourself going through that transition vortex tunnel, whatever it is, and you might have this mental thing happen to you where you kind of temporarily your mind expands outward. You kind of forget a little bit about what's happening around you as you kind of merge into not a galactic soup, but just your next life. At which point, you'll be back to normal again. But sometimes these effects can happen. It's nothing to freak out about. It doesn't mean we lose who we are. And please be skeptical when you hear researchers say that this is what happens and our deceased loved ones must be illusions, and we never come back from that point. We just get we get gobbled up by the light and we never return. Stay skeptical of that. I know I am, because that doesn't feel right to me, and this is a very interesting way of looking at it. That's it for this video. Try to get another video up tomorrow. And yeah, if you like this, if you like these subjects, you can head to afterlifetopics.com. Check out books like Understanding Life After Death, The Afterlife and Beyond, where I go into these kinds of subjects and more. Understanding Life After Death is a good book for your normie friends if they are showing some interest in the subject and they want to come at it from, transitioning from the kind of rigid skeptical perspective. So that book might help. And you can join the Facebook group Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, or as I mentioned before, sign up on Patreon, donate a couple bucks a month so you can kind of get hands-on involvement. $30 or more is the classes. All of this helps keep this close to full-time work I do in this area going, while still being able to feed myself while I live out of a backpack, and funding future events and stuff that'll go back into this work. Maybe conferences someday, or maybe productions, documentary filmmaking, all kinds of stuff like that is possible, but needs your support to keep that going. Okay guys, this is Cyrus. I'll catch you on the next video.